Are we recording? I'm gonna start with the land acknowledgement first, and then we'll do some introductions of our new. Did we do an introduction of all of our new IA staff?
We could do all of them.
I think we should.
Okay, let's do it. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, we're gonna do our land acknowledgement first, and then we'll proceed. Since time immemorial, the Kalapuya people have been the indigenous stewards to our region, building dynamic communities, maintaining balance with wildlife, and enacting sustainable land practices. Today, this land acknowledgement is a way of resisting the erasure of indigenous histories and to honor Native communities by inviting truth and reconciliation. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, Kalapuya people were dispossessed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government and forcibly removed to the Coast Reservation in Western Oregon. As we consider the impacts of colonization, we also acknowledge the strength and resiliency of displaced indigenous people. The city of Eugene is built within the traditional homelands known as Kalapuya Ilihi. Kalapuya descendants are citizens of the Confederate tribes of the Grand Ronde community of Oregon and the Confederated tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon. They continue to make contributions in our communities here and across the lands. We express our respect for the inherent political sovereignty of all federally recognized tribal nations and indigenous people who live in the state of Oregon and across the nation. We have some new folks to introduce today that we're working with.
Yeah, thank you, Jose.
Take us away.
I'm gonna let Cindy actually.
Great.
Would you like to do it? Yeah, sure. We have Cindy here, who's our professional standards manager.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you have, probably most of you have met Sergeant Peckles, and you've been in the spot for a couple of years now.
Almost 2 years.
And he'll have at least one more unless he decides to, sign up for more because he just loves it so much. And then I'd like to welcome John Jensen. He's sergeant here at EPD and he just came to us end of last month. So we just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware, had met him, and at some point he'll have cases that you will review.
I asked Sergeant Vincent to say too, just like why he wanted to do IA. Julie, you get a chance. If you want to do that, you can, but he would give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I, just to give you guys a little background of who I am, I started at Eugene Police around about 10 years ago. Since then, I've worked as a member of our crisis negotiation team. I've worked on our arson investigation team and honor guard, and then also as a detective in the violent crimes unit. And so that's kind of where I come from. It's those kind of skills that I've learned and been able to pick up that made me kind of curious about internal affairs. Being able to receive a case in violent crimes and just kind of following the facts and learn as I go was really helpful in just keeping an open mind and just trying to find out what really happened. And that was my goal then, and that's my goal now. So yeah, thanks.
And you can, we all know you.
Sorry, I just got my voice back yesterday afternoon. So I've been with EPD for 17 years. I was promoted in 2019, sergeant, and 15 of those 17, basically the last 2 years now, we're all patrol. So getting that dive into more administrative and kind of the behind the scenes workings in the police department was what I was curious in, and to try to get a little better understanding on kind of how the machine, I guess, works, for lack of better words.
Thank you. And sorry for making you talk.
No.
We're not.
We'll ask them a lot of questions
Yeah.
later. Yeah. Thank you all, and thank you for giving us that time.
Thank you, Leah. Okay, so for our agenda, we are going to move to the minutes approval from our September meeting. At this point, does anybody have any amendments to make to the meeting minutes from last month?
Does anybody have a copy? Just happen to have a hard copy?
I can print one out and we could shift it. to
I have
the-
like two really minor things on page 5,
Thank you.
that is in the paragraph describing what I said, and it's an addition and a deletion, and I wrote it out and left it at home, so.
We can
um,
print one out for you
but,
and,
And I don't know if,
Modify
how
those.
you wanna, handle that, it was just correcting they would not need to seize a stereo and and cups for beer in order to prove their case, so the needed to be inserted.
got it.
And there was one other thing, but it's similar and not substantive, so I think we could approve.
Well,
But
how
it's
about
up to you.
this?
Do it at the break.
I move to table this discussion until after 6, let's make it 6.5. And then we can return and review that and vote on it together.
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
No, don't be
I could
sorry, I
just
think-
Write it on the page.
I think that's a good way to give you some time to,
Thank you.
or to give us all
I
time.
prepared that then.
I don't know if we have to second that, but I will.
All right,
All in favor?
Thank
Okay,
you. Yeah.
do we have quorum?
you do. Good
Wonderful.
question. You got it.
Thanks for previewing me this
You're
morning.
welcome.
Is it 4 that's quorum?
Yeah.
Great.
It's on
Thank
the
you,
back.
Leah.
No problem.
Did anyone else have any? Sorry to jump in there.
No, please.
I don't have any changes. I just liked how they reflected my feedback. I thought it wasn't a transcript, but it was what I was saying. I think that's important. One for me looking back, but I think if anyone was ever interested in that case, my thoughts were clear.
Good. That's good feedback.
That is good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, paraphrasing is a difficult skill, so thank you all.
And I should say, we weren't able to find a synchronous minutes recorder for this meeting, so they're gonna use our Zoom recording to do the minutes for next month, so we'll see how that goes, but FYI, if you're wondering.
Great. Thank you.
I'm actually ready if you're ready, if you want to just dispense with it or move on.
Do I need to rescind my motion?
I think you're amongst friends.
Okay.
Chair, it's up to-
I wouldn't worry.
Please, Alan.
It's on page 3 of the minutes, Lyman said, line 3, an officer would not, and I want to insert the word need to seize the stereo and empty cups to prove there was noise and drinking. And then 4 lines down from that, it says at least 2 of the officers had warrant templates in their possession, which made it seem like the officers went into this situation with a retaliatory mindset. I would like to strike with a retaliatory mindset and insert more likely to issue a warrant. I didn't review the tape, but that's what I was intending to say. So that I would ask that they be approved with that amendment, which I'm handing to
Thank you.
Lindsay. If that's one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. Okay. Other amendments to the September meeting minutes. All right, at this time, at this moment, we have some time for commission liaison reports and comments from board members.
We should.
I'm
approve
sorry.
it.
It's okay, just approve the minutes.
Yes.
Or
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Lindsay.
As amended.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I abstain.
Oh,
Well, you all.
good job. Oh, I guess anybody opposed, no, okay, we're good.
At least not right now. Now we have time for commission liaisons and comments from board members. Clay, do you have a report today?
I do not. I'm coming back from time away when I was not serving on either of this commission for a couple of months, or on this board for a couple of months, or on the equity committee, which the actual board name now is not.
Human Rights
Thank
Commission.
you, Human Rights Commission. Thank you. So I was serving on neither, so I have no board report. My only personal report is that I'm glad to be back. So
We are
Nice to see
glad
you
you're
all.
back.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
thank you.
Alan?
I do have a report from the police commission, and that last meeting, we heard the annual report from our auditor, which went well despite the technology thing that she had nothing to do with, but the presentation was well received. And then I'm really happy to see, I don't know that the training topic tonight, Cindy reported, I've now been through 2 police commission cycles of hearing an annual report of the Office of Professional Standards. And you all have been hearing me harp about, we don't hear anything about discipline, we don't know what happens, and we're in a bubble. Well, this piece really is really important, and I think will provide context to everyone, and I think it should be an annual thing, that this report, and it also demonstrated how dang important Cindy is to the city and the process, like, it was, that is both, remarkable, like an incredible length of service, and also, a little anxiety inducing, because eventually you will retire. And we don't want a process to be dependent on the person in the role, but the clarity and it fills in what is kind of missing from just looking at snapshots of what complaints and how certain ones are done, which is our role. But so without blabbing anymore, I just think it's really important, and it should be an annual feature, and I'm looking forward to hearing it. So that was it. Thank you.
Do we have other liaisons?
No,
Just as 2.
Thank you.
does other board members want it?
I do not have any.
Sorry, I'm taking over and I apologize. Rick? Jose?
Thank you for your grace tonight
You
in
did
advance. Okay, we have some time for public comment now. Do we have any audience members on
Check
Zoom? We have 2.
If anyone who's attending virtually would like to offer public comment, you need to raise your little hand. And then we will proceed to public comment. You get 30 seconds. No, not 30 seconds, 3 minutes to speak. We will raise a little warning sign when it's 30 seconds. I apologize, but difference. Then give you guys a couple more chances if you want to raise your hands. And seeing none, I think we don't have anyone in person for public comment. I think we can move on. And if anyone is having trouble and like not able to raise their little hands, you can email your comments to us and we will get them to the board members.
Sorry, I anticipated some comment. Took a bite of a cookie. Thank you, Leah. It is time for us to do our training topic. Please take it away.
Yeah.
Want me here?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Hello. All right. Whoops. You doing? I didn't think you do it. So Cindy, as I said, is the manager of the Office of Professional Standards. Cindy and I work together the whole time I've been here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
She's taught me a lot. And she's meticulous and wonderful. And there you go.
Well, thank you. So, first I'd just like to start with, we already did a little bit of introductions, but for this report, just a reminder, it's for calendar year 2020. It's for the Office of Professional Standards. IA is definitely a component of that, but we have a few other functions that we do in the section as well. So will you run the PowerPoint for me?
Give me the click, I will
Okay. I wanted to point out that for 2022, the cases that were investigated were by Sergeant Ryan Nelson and Sergeant Joel Peckles. So even though Sergeant Nelson has been promoted to Lieutenant Nelson, he's no longer with us, but now in the future, we'll be looking at 4 cases from Joel Peckles and John Jensen. We also have Rick Weber in our office. He is an integral part to the day-to-day function of the office. We couldn't do it without him. He keeps us on track. He is a very, I would say, a primary resource for the auditor's office to assist them in their preliminary investigations, to get them the documentation, the video, whatever they need to do their preliminary look at cases. So he's integral. And then myself. So just a couple of things to note about the stats. I assure you, we are looking at the same database, but there is some variations and some slight discrepancies in how we report the data. And I also had the benefit of finalizing my report after all of the 2022 cases were able to be closed. So there's some discrepancies there. But the highlight that I think is important for you to see for 2022 is that we only had 16 formal allegations of misconduct. And I believe this group is uniquely aware of the classification types, but I will go over that just really briefly. So we have our formal allegations of misconduct, which would include criminal allegations of misconduct. And those are assigned to IA investigators and go through the full process of investigation as well as adjudication. And then if any of the allegations are sustained, then it would go through a disciplinary phase. We have next in line is incident reviews. Those are preliminary investigations that are usually assigned to an IA sergeant, and they provide the information that the auditor needs to help her determine whether or not it's appropriate to reclass perhaps to an IA, or sometimes a downward reclassification to a service complaint is done. But the ones that you see there, that 28, that means those were all closed out as incident reviews with the investigation by the IA sergeant and a memo. And that has been, I think, a great thing we instituted in 2016 to help get the information and the review that we need without doing a full IA. So that's been, I think that's been a positive thing for the department and the community, actually. 286, I think that's what that says. Service complaints or supervisor actions, I mean. So that's that whole body of complaints that are classified as either a service complaint, a policy complaint, or an inquiry by the auditor. You can see that's the bulk of the complaints that come in through the auditor's office and handled by the police department. And then we've got the commendations. I think that's 356. So that's just a look, 5-year trend, or look back and see how it compares from year to year. 10-year averages. This one I'm going to cheat and look at my report. I can see
very
it.
far away.
It's very hard. I think the thing I wanted to point out is that we were well below the 10-year average for IA cases last year. I think we went up a little bit from the previous year on service complaints, but that can happen from year to year to have some fluctuation. And then we went down a little bit on incident reviews last year from 2021. And then next one. Pardon me. So, and this is just a highlight. I wanted to point out that the annual report that was prepared is available online on the city's website under EPD publications or under IA. And it has way more detail that I'm going to go over tonight in 20 minutes, as well as some reference documents that are linked through that report as well. So this is just a cap on the internal affairs investigations. If Rob can. So again, this one is, these are just the IA cases that were classified by the auditor as IA. And the auditor needs to give each case a general classification. And this just shows that last year, most of them were categorized as performance cases. One thing that's important to remember about these is that each case can and often does contain more than one employee and more than one allegation. But this is just looking at the snapshot of those 16 cases as a whole. And this shows how those 16 cases were disposed at the end of the investigation. So if any of the allegations in a case are adjudicated as sustained, the case will be considered a sustained dispo for that case. And you can see we had 9 of them sustained last year. And go to the next one. So this is just a little deeper dive in looking at the allegations by subclass. So each of those allegations in a case are given a type broken down by use of force, performance, courtesy, constitutional rights, or conduct. And so this shows you how those cases were categorized by type, not the cases, but the allegations within the cases, and how they were adjudicated.
And blue,
Again, you can see a lot of sustained.
blue is sustained.
Blue and sustained, yeah.
I don't wanna, I
Sure.
don't wanna jump in too much. Our sustained rate in general is much higher than what I see in other agencies. And my thinking is not so much that there's more bad actors or anything like that. I think it's more that we do a really good job of weeding out at the preliminary investigation and the early investigative stage. Once we get to an allegation of misconduct, we aren't gonna sort of launch that unless we're fairly certain we've got something sort of to chew on there. I don't know. if that's
Or
the
at
right
least
way to-
problematic, and we need to
Thank you.
take a closer look.
That's a way to put it.
Can I ask?
Sure.
You said there's a group of sustained constitutional right matters. How many of those are just? Let me restart that. Is there any delineation for just violations of policy?
Well,
That's
Is that
in
going to
my report.
misconduct?
Yeah.
yeah, technically these are all policy violations. The next slide's gonna show you which actual directives were cited. If that's maybe what you're getting at.
What I'm thinking of is we've got a case today that's got a constitutional right claim and a policy violation. How's that gonna be classified?
Well,
Mm.
just to note, that was the 2023 case
Yes.
that we're looking at tonight as well. But so it would probably be classified as a constitutional rights because that's the predominant thing that we're looking at. So the subclass would be constitutional rights. If you want to, Rob, if you want to show the next one, I think that might help.
No,
Whoa,
maybe
not the
not the
next
next one.
The next one.
I might not have it on here.
Actually, so Rick, what I should say is in our annual, we report these things just a little bit differently, right? So in the auditor's annual report, I separate out by specific allegation. And then in that report, I say which ones of those were sustained and not sustained. So if you're looking for the specific policy violations that were sustained or not, that's something that you can find in our report.
And you can
And
find it in
also
mine
there.
too, on the report on this slide that I guess I didn't put in there, because
Okay.
it's so tiny,
Does that?
but maybe what you're
My
getting
concern
at.
is that if someone looked at that and said, well, these guys are guilty of all these constitutional right violations, when they could be just violations of policy. Because the policy may indeed be slightly different than the Constitution says, depending on who's interpreting it when.
Well, they are held to our department policy, and one of our policies is that they can't,
Violate the Constitution.
they can't
Yeah.
violate search and seizure, for example.
We do our best, Rick.
Yeah.
All right.
But they are held to the language in our policy and how we train and how that's in making sure that we're holding them to that expectation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask, is it true that we just saw that the majority of cases that you say that there's something wrong, that they are sustained?
Yeah, so I think, the way Cindy looks at it was 9 of 16 were sustained, so 9 of the 16
Yeah.
had a sustained,
Yeah, well over half.
yeah.
And is that, has that been true over time?
We're usually right around.
Generally speaking, I think we expect to see a high sustained rate. I think I
Yeah.
agree with Leah that we generally, I can't say this enough, with the addition to body cameras,
Mhm.
we've had way more information available to all of us on the front end, and the auditor's office has done a tremendous job of doing a thoughtful review at that preliminary investigation to identify cases that are appropriate for dismissal at intake, so it doesn't even get assigned to the department. Where before, a lot of those were getting assigned, and we did that part of the work, so they're doing a lot of that work. And on the ones that are being assigned, they're still doing, I think, a really thoughtful analysis of, okay, what do we have here? And ultimately, the auditor's office, Leah, has the ultimate authority to decide on classification, and classification that is the decision that drives how everything else goes. If it goes in the investigative track with an IA, or if it goes in the incident review track or a source complaint track. So that thoughtful review on the front end does aid us in getting, I think, good results.
It's good to see.
Okay, thanks.
And your resources are expended more efficiently because of that. Your resources are expended more efficiently because.
Yes, I think
That makes
so. I think so. And, I mean, it's not that the incident reviews assigned to the sergeants aren't a lot of work. But in the scheme of things, if that was going to a full IA investigation and that whole process of the adjudication and the discipline phase, I mean, that all is, it's stressful for employees. So if we don't need to do that, if we can get to where we need to be to understand what happened without that, that's good for everyone. So I'm a fan of incident reviews.
Can I ask a question?
Of course,
Would you prefer us, can we ask questions during your presentation?
you can do this however
Wait
you
till the
want.
end?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's more coming, so it might be covered, but if not, you're welcome to ask.
Can you go back about 4 slides, please? Okay, that's good. Sorry, one more. Forward. This one says we have insufficient evidence is 2. Go back 1, please. Insufficient evidence. 6.
Yeah, so
So-
there were,
Go ahead.
no, you go ahead. Sure.
Well, so how I've organized this statistical report is, one is just the breakdown between the different types of investigations. And right now we're just talking IAs. And then I broke it down by, okay, here's the 16 and how those are classified, knowing that there can be a lot of things embedded within one case.
Right.
And Leah only gets to choose one sub-classification. So there could be a use of force and a performance. She's going to classify that as a use of force. There could be a constitutional rights and a courtesy. She's going to classify that as a constitutional rights on that first slide. But here, or on the other slide, what we're now on the 40, out of those 16 cases, there were 40 individual allegations that were investigated and adjudicated. And that is how those came out.
And so there's 3 insufficient evidence in performance. We're testing my eyes. This is fun.
Well,
And
that's
this
I
is
see it now.
harder.
Yeah, 1 in courtesy and 1 in
Yeah.
2 and it's done.
conduct.
And again,
I see, thank you.
for
Yeah,
it's
more
like today.
detailed information, there's this chart that actually shows which specific policy violation was cited in the case.
And do you like to see low insufficient evidence numbers?
Personally, I would prefer that we're able to figure it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
That would be the preference, is that it's either sustained or it is unfounded. Insufficient evidence means we weren't able to get enough evidence gathered for the adjudicators, ultimately the chief, to land the other way. Citizens
Or
don't
simply
prefer
the
it.
evidence that you found is not sufficient.
Right, right. So it's sometimes employees don't like it, usually complainants don't like it, but that is sometimes the way that it is.
And insufficient evidence is treated like dismissed or
No.
like within policy?
Insufficient evidence is treated that there was not enough evidence available to adjudicate it.
Yeah, to prove or disprove.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so there's no corrective action unless it's sustained.
Gotcha.
That's where you're going.
Yeah, yeah.
Sustained is
exactly.
the only adjudication that will result in that disciplinary phase.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Where we are now. Oh,
We're wondering.
sustained rates, this is just, this is
Back one, maybe.
a review of the sustained rates looking back to 2018 and how they compare. So if you're looking at 2022, you can see that 9 of the cases that we had were internal and 7 were external. And 5 of the 9 were 5 of them that were internally generated were sustained, and 2 of the citizen complaints were sustained.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
2 out of 7 versus 5 out of 9.
yeah.
Well, typically, if something is generated internally, there's a fair, we know when there's a policy, generally speaking, we know a policy violation when we see it, or at least launch it.
Makes sense.
And that could be a contributing factor.
So this is a good, anybody watching, it's a good thing to see a high number of internal complaints.
I think it shows a culture of integrity.
You can see through this chart that there has been a high number of internal complaints for the last few years.
I'm not making any judgments, I'm saying
Yeah.
that number is higher than I thought it would be.
This is just, well, we don't go into just telling you how each case gets,
This is a trend.
this is a trend. And
That was.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we had 2 written reprimands, 3 oral reprimands, 5 documented counselings, and 2 coachings. And I can go into what the discipline means if you like, but there is a reference document attached to the report in the packet if you want to look at that.
And I'm really briefly, there's been some discussion at this board about suspension, and I just want to say I learned from Cindy at the police commission at this presentation that because public employees, I should have known this, have a privacy right in their jobs, you are depriving the privacy right when there's a suspension. You are not when there's a documented counseling or so the chief has the ability to do discipline. It's more, or corrective action, as the union wants to call it. But there's more flexibility without this additional layer of imposing another hearing and a layer of due process. And so for efficiency, like I could really understand at times when I'm like, why didn't that draw, or you never know if it did or didn't. But it allows me to understand why the chief may choose not to use the tool of suspension if he, in this case, he can achieve the result without that. So I'm sorry for that interruption, but to me, it was insightful.
And a point of
Thank
clarity, I think you were referring to property right instead of.
Property right, sorry, yes, thank you, sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question about the
Sure.
12? So
Sure.
does that mean, because there were 12 total disciplinary or corrective actions taken, that's one case might lead to multiple corrective actions?
That's right. So the way I like to think of it is you can have a 1-to-1-to-1, like one case, one employee, one allegation, one adjudication, and if it's sustained, one discipline. It can happen that way. Most often it's this 1-to-many, but when you're done, you bring it on down to one disposition for the case. But and we bring it down to just one corrective action per employee that had a sustained allegation. So this means that there was more than one employee in cases where corrective action was warranted.
Thanks.
Incident reviews. So this is the different bucket, if you will, of complaints we're talking about now. And I will my cheat sheet here. We've already talked about some of the benefits of of incident review, but this shows the 28 that were classified that way. This means they got closed out that way as well. And they were mostly, performance and conduct classified by the auditor as that. Supervisor actions. So this is that body of complaints. It's our biggest bucket of complaints, falls into this category. These are almost always assigned to the employee's first line supervisor, their sergeant, or their communications supervisor, or what have you. And the categories that are included in supervisor actions are service complaints, policy complaints, and inquiries. This is just a chart that shows you how those supervisor actions were broken out. 57% of them were service complaints. And this one is just, the next one is just a show of the past 5 years, how they were compared, how 2022 compares to the previous years. So with service complaints, we do, or Leah does, subclassify these, so we can just get a better understanding of what the complaint was about. And 50% of these were performance related.
For service level, typically we'll call it that if it's, they never came, they didn't take a report, that kind of thing. So that's one of those things that sort of trends up and down with staffing levels quite often. But that's one that you can kind of, like, the driving complaint is almost always performance, but they didn't show up is almost always service levels. So you kind of have an idea of what those are.
Do you remember what other was?
There's some fascinating stories in the other column.
Look forward to hearing about it at a different
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
Have you had any founded discrimination cases or sustained?
No, that's a good question. Not to my recollection. There's also a different reporting process for those, so it's something I can speak more to, because the
Yeah.
the state puts a requirement on the police department to do reporting on those as well.
And I think I have a slide on that.
Oh, yes, you do. I'll stop talking. Oh, there we go.
But one of the things that we've done in the last handful of years is, while we have the categories of like service complaint or performance and service level, we were feeling like it would be good to have just a little bit more information on some of the things that we were feeling, at least at the time, seemed to be trending. Like during COVID, we had a lot of COVID related complaints.
Sure.
And then we've also had over the years, a lot of complaints regarding prohibited camping and camping in the parks. Of course, in 2020, we had the riots and the protests. So we just added a category to each complaint. So these complaints are all part of the complaints that we've already talked about. It's just they have an additional category to help us track those.
What would be a COVID complaint? Yeah.
The officer didn't wear a mask, or the officer did, I mean,
Or we wanted the officer to cite somebody for not wearing a mask, and they didn't, there was a lot of just.
yeah. And we will continue to add to this list as we as a group sort of decide that it would be helpful, and we have added a couple more,
It's a fun tool.
but not here. But one of the ones that we track using the category just to help us is our bias-based policing complaints that I report to the state. So if you see the LECC reporting, that's what that means.
So this is like another column in a spreadsheet, essentially, like, maybe it's not organized that
It's
way,
more
but
like
like.
a tag
a
on a
tag, yeah,
case.
totally.
A
It's
category
Filter
tag.
that way.
Yeah,
Can you remind us what LECC stands for?
law enforcement communication, contacts committee, law enforcement contacts committee.
It's a state level.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think it's changed names.
I think, well, if it's changed names, I'm not aware of
Never
it.
mind, yeah, no,
It's
it's still the same category in our system.
Okay.
you're right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so if you look at this just shows how many cases in 2022 got that added category tag and what they were. And it seems like driving complaints are continuing to be something that people complain about. And I would say this year is no different. They're continuing to, they pay attention to our driving. And they let us know how they feel about our driving.
It's a mutual thing, you know, they pay attention. to us.
Yeah. All right. This is meant to just show you, going back to 2016, and 2016 was just a partial year. That's the year we started reporting out. So, when there is a complaint of bias-based policing, not to be confused at all with a complaint that a biased crime has happened. That's a different thing. This is where the officers are accused of making a law enforcement decision based on that was biased in some way. So if they make a complaint, it gets entered into the system, whether it comes in through the auditor's office or blue team, it gets entered in, it gets classified by the auditor, investigated as it normally would. And then the additional step is that I report that to the state on behalf of the department about what the investigation revealed.
How are we to read the spike in 2018 of inquiries? Is that a statistical anomaly?
I believe so. I believe so. I mean, there were a lot of complaints that year, and then they markedly dropped.
I will also just note it doesn't look like any incident reviews that year, so that might have been a difference in the classification of how things. I
Right.
mean,
Oh,
obviously we
okay.
got like an uptick,
That's
but
true.
also, you know, Mark and I had a total mind meld, just kidding, but like, you know, we were gonna classify things a little bit differently with Lindsay and Rob, things get a little differently, there's gonna be shifts over time, so.
But the important
Gotcha.
thing I would like you to remember is that all of these are already included in all the stats of the investigations that we've already talked about. It's just that an additional category, and it does have an additional requirement that I report on for the department.
So the fact that there are no blue in 2022, 21, 20, or 2019 shows a positive trend, and there's one previously.
Right. And it's, yeah. I'm not sure if I have. One other thing that we report, that's in the report, that I track separately, but included, is respectful work environment complaints. So, they are still complaints, but they have, sometimes have uniqueness to that, in that sometimes they are led by HR or Employee Resource Center. Sometimes, most of the time, they're a combined effort because they've got some other conduct related stuff to them mostly. So they're looked at a case by case basis. We review them, we get the right people at the table, and figure out what makes sense to how to process that particular complaint. And so but often there's a participation from IA, the auditor, and the Employee Resource Center. Vehicle crashes. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but our office does, the database also tracks other things, and we track I call them vehicle incidences, because we track anytime there's been damage to one of our police fleet vehicles, regardless of the cause. So it could be a citizen threw a rock in the window, or kicked out a back window, or a crash, or it doesn't matter. We'll track it. So that's what those numbers represent.
In the old city hall, there were a lot of posts.
We had a lot of posts in the parking level of the old city hall.
Sorry, that's one thing I learned.
We still have a fair amount of colliding with fixed objects. It does happen, so we track that. And this is just an illustration of, most of them are in patrol, as you might imagine. And And again, not all of them are at fault. A lot of these, they could be the citizen at fault or citizen caused damage, but this just is a little snapshot of kind of where those incidences are happening.
Is that the next highest level? I can't read that.
Not at fault or within policy.
Okay.
Another way that we,
Investigations.
oh,
Sorry,
that's
also,
down.
yeah.
Sworn officers that are not on patrol and investigators.
Right.
Yeah.
did you say not on patrol?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
included
the
in here.
left is, but the left.
So
Okay.
the top two, the big two columns are for patrol vehicles. The next two columns are for investigations vehicles.
Or volunteer.
Yeah.
At fault.
Not within policy.
Within policy?
Not at fault and within policy.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Sure, great question. So sometimes we intentionally, as a tactical vehicle intervention, hit a car.
Oh,
And so we track it because one of our fleet vehicles got damaged. We want to track it, but it wasn't an accident.
Like
We
a
meant to
pit
do
or
it. Yep, exactly.
For the next training.
And this is just an illustration of all the thousands of miles officers all of our EPD staff. This is the whole, any EPD that is
Yeah.
driving.
The last
Million.
percentage based on the number of miles, that's incredible.
Yeah.
60 little things and 1.7 million.
Vehicle pursuits, this is something else we track.
Oh, sorry.
And you guys, I know you've talked about it, and I believe Captain Adams gave you a presentation and gave you some information about the change in policies we had, but this is attributed to change in policy, I believe, and we've already had it. I don't know how many we've had so far. The 14 we've had this year that's not reflected here. So it's an upward trend based on a policy change.
But the
So
policy was supposed to be more restrictive, but I'm
It-
saying no in terms of supervisor approval of the pursuit.
well, it changed in, was it 2014? And then we saw the drop, because it used to be really, really high.
Yeah.
So it changed to be more restrictive and it went down to just a few a year. And then changed again and,
We are working on our report on the pursuit stuff as well, and we'll be
Yeah.
talking to you more, and we have some
Awesome.
suggestions and ideas.
Yeah.
That fun stuff, but yes, it's a whole lot
yes.
of pursuits.
This is just a little illustration of the reasons pursuits are initiated. And this is based on the data that the sergeant puts in to our database as to what they're indicating. And just a look at the 5-year trend on the reasons that they were indicated that they were initiated. Force response. So one of the things that we changed a couple of years ago is we've been tracking use of force for a while, but one of the things that significant change is we decided to also start tracking shows of force. But we also changed who was going to be doing the data entry and have that responsibility. So officers now have the responsibility to log into Blue Team, which is the sister companion software to iPro, and fill out an incident every time they're involved in a reportable use of force or a reportable show of force. And that gets routed to their sergeant, and the sergeant has a responsibility of pulling and reviewing reports and video and making at least a preliminary assessment and decision on whether they think it's within policy or not, and routing it through the chain. These are all visible to my office and Leah's office as soon as they get entered. And we all review them. So in addition to the chain of command and our office and the auditor's office, they're also, our defensive tactics sergeant is also copied on every single one of these too. So they can be paying attention to see if they see any trends and need to make any adjustments to training. Factors leading up to force. Active resistance was listed as at 50% of the time, attempt to flee 13 and actually armed 9. 91 of the cases resulted in arrest. And the average age of the offender was 36. So you might ask, what about the others? What happens? Those are usually some indication of sometimes mental health necessity, something like that, where they're taken to the hospital and not taken to.
The 9%.
Yeah.
That didn't need to rest.
Taser deployment, the use decreased 20% from 2021. Effectiveness increased to 54%. 20 were effective, 12 were deemed ineffective for a variety of reasons, and 15 of those were listed as limited effectiveness. And that can be anything from the probes didn't hit, or they got disconnected, the spread was too small, or things like that.
And now this group has had the opportunity to shoot a taser.
Real quick, in a moment, so we reviewed a case a couple months ago where an officer pursued a person into a yard and deployed the taser. That would be included in those statistics too, right? Like even if it was, I think it was sustained that it was outside of policy.
Honestly, don't remember, but yes, that would all, every.
That would be
single-
included in
yeah,
there, right?
so like-
As not effective or effective?
Well, so this is.
Right,
all-
right, yeah.
So this is all based on, so now it's based on what the
Yeah.
officer. So this is the data points that you're talking about. This is what the officer is putting in there in terms of what they believe if it's effective or not.
Ah, I see, okay.
So, and
Typically,
Go ahead.
sorry, typically it's like if they're, usually they're using the taser to try to get somebody in handcuffs, right? And so it's like, if they did the taser and they got NMI and they could get the person in handcuffs, that's gonna be effective.
Gotcha, self-reported.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
yeah. Oh, this is just a chart that shows how the effectiveness rates.
So sorry,
Yeah.
we just go back 2 slides. So is the 15 on the bottom, I think is that a typo? Because the next slide shows 5.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Yes, it
Because
is.
it didn't add up to the percentages you had, so.
That math didn't look
Yeah.
good to me either. Thank you.
So the previous slide is the one with the error.
Yeah.
I think that's why I asked. I was like,
Thank you.
that seems like a large number compared to the other two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the next
No, you're
one
right.
shows that, okay.
Thank you.
Look at these math.
I know. Just a little bit of information about our canine use of force. We had 13 in 2022, which was just a slight decrease from the 16 we had in 2021. They were all deemed effective and within policy. This is a snapshot of the 7 most common force types that we see and how they have kind of fluctuated over the years. Most of them, you'll see that they've reduced a little bit.
Interesting, 2019 was also a high year for complaints.
Yeah.
And I think it's coincidence, I
Sure.
haven't done anything, I'm just like, oh, yeah. Interesting.
Well, before I go off that, I just want to, I know it's come up in this training before, or in this forum before, but wanted to point out that we talk about de-escalation a lot, and de-escalation is trained and it's kind of woven into all the training that they do to offer any incident. They're when they're showing up on scene, if there's an opportunity to de-escalate, they're trying to do that. So that's the first, their presence and trying to de-escalate the first things they try. And then for show of force, I wanted to just give a little information about what we're tracking there. So this is, it's reportable show of force if an officer points their either extended range impact weapon, firearm, or taser at a person to gain compliance. So specific, pointed at a person to gain compliance. Not having their weapon out at low ready. And for the canine, it used as a deterrent to gain compliance. Not that they are out on the scene or anything, but if they are engaging their dog at a specific individual. So this is just a reflection of, in 2022, the uses of those shows of force. And again, this is for each officer. That's being reported. They each have to do their own.
Is there any policy that dictates when officers are able to point their guns at someone?
Good question.
I'm gonna
think so.
point, I'm gonna go to the guy that has the experience of doing it.
We see specific, like when you can. But it would fall under our use of force policies, you can justify it based on the circumstances, the totality of it. And what force you believe is reasonable.
So show of force falls along that continuum. And then are there categories of show of force, like is pointing your taser a lower level of show of force than pointing a firearm?
Well, they're all reportable.
Yeah, right.
So
But I guess when you're evaluating like
Lethal.
appropriate response
Gotcha.
to appropriate. like,
I mean,
appropriate-
yeah,
Yeah,
I would say you're gonna be able to point your taser at someone before your fire.
yeah.
But each of these are also reviewed, the officers put them in, the sergeants have the responsibility to pull video and reports, review all those and give an assessment of whether or not they think it's within policy.
So every time that they do point their guns at someone, they have, like, they put that in blue team?
Yes, if they point their gun at a specific individual to gain compliance, but not just if they show up on the scene and they have their gun out and it's low ready. But if they're engaging someone,
Yeah.
that would be a reportable show of force. And that is new. We didn't used to do that.
There was, so when tasers first came on scene, there was for a while, taser displays were also being tracked, and then that fell off because it was sort of part of the taser pilot project. And then Mark and I were cranky because frankly, like showing it just like a taser display is a very effective show of force. Like, I forget what the stats were, but it was.
Yeah.
And, so we were very excited when they decided to start tracking the shows of force and always have wanted to be able to track the firearm pointing. So this is exciting to be able to.
Yeah, it was a little bit odd. I mean, I know why we did the taser reporting because
Right.
there was a lot of public interest in that and concern about potential misuse. And so we were very
Right.
transparent about that, but yet we weren't doing that with firearms.
Right.
So it seemed a
It was
little,
very strange.
but anyway, now we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't write a long story for you.
Can I say, interject real quick? Could we get a copy of this like in an email form?
Yeah, sorry, I realized we didn't put it in the packet for you.
I think that would be really helpful for everybody to follow along, and I want to say that I'm really thankful for your labor and time. This is really fascinating and helpful. I do want to know the time that it's 6:30 and we have to get to our case review. Are there any last things that you could leave us with?
You know, I think the last thing I would leave you with is, yes, refer to this for a more comprehensive, understanding of what the report entails, but we look at every case, whether it's a service complaint or full IA, with the lens of, are there any lessons learned here? In other words, it could be a very serious case about use of force, but we identify a policy issue that might need to be addressed, or a training issue that might need to be addressed, or another performance issue from another employee that may not be the subject of the complaint. So we look at all of them for lessons learned, and we try to make adjustments to policy and training as appropriate and deal with performance issues as they are identified. And that's, in essence, that would be my final words.
Thank you
But
so
I'm
much.
happy to answer any other questions, but
Thank you so
also.
much.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope that the board members, like, it's really some
I have to
context.
agree with Alan, that is, that you really are impressive.
Oh my gosh, you should write it down.
And it's, and it's just context. It's really
Oh, thank
needed context to do this work, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
That's
I know that.
We're gonna take a 5-minute recess.
Yeah.
We'll be back at 6:30. Our first round of discussion will be general comments. Second round of discussion will be complaint intake, classification, and monitoring. Maybe I'll just wait to say that and kind of guide us. Okay, now at this point. So general comments. Alan, would you like to begin us this round?
Mr. Vice Chair, would you prefer to have the staff presentation of the allegations?
Oh my
prior
gosh,
to
excuse me.
beginning the
Thank you for
discussion?
the
You're
reminder.
welcome.
Yes.
I
No
like
problem.
your commitment to the time.
Yeah, I would be happy to skip it, but Rob prepared a lot.
Rob, please. Thank you. And thank you for your work preparing this case summary.
I think, I'm gonna do it this way, so I won't show the slideshow, so you'll see to the left. I think this is the owl Zoom problem. We're working on it. So our case review allegations of improper search and seizure and failed body worn video deployment. So the summary of facts. So on July 22nd, 2022, Citizen One called the Eugene Police Department Communications Center and requested police assistance. Officer A responded to Citizen One's residence. Citizen One said he or she allowed an individual, who we'll call suspect, into his or her residence and allowed him or her to use Citizen One's cellular telephone. Citizen One said while suspect was inside the residence, he or she stole 2 cellular telephones, and one of the telephones was broken and the second telephone was utilized by Citizen One's 5-year-old child from the residence and then left. Citizen One said he or she exchanged electronic messages with suspect and expressed a desire to recover the cellular telephones. Citizen One said that the request to recover the cellular telephones were unsuccessful. Citizen One told Officer A that he or she gained access to the suspect's electronic messenger and email. So when suspect used Citizen One's cellular telephone, he or she signed into his or her account and forgot to sign out. So Citizen One informed Officer A that suspect's electronic communications contained exchanges regarding illicit drug trafficking, and he or she captured some of the discussions. Officer A questioned Citizen One about suspect's drug activity. So Citizen One said he or she believed the suspect was staying with his or her parents, which is the reporting party, which we will call RP, and provided Officer A with RP's address. Later on July 22nd, Officer A went to RP's residence. Officer B assisted Officer A with the investigation. Officer A arrived at the front door of RP's residence, opened the exterior door, pushed the interior door open, and announced, "Hello, your door is open." And it's noteworthy, when the officers arrived at the residence, the exterior screen storm door was closed and the interior door was slightly ajar. Moments later, Officer A and Officer B entered RP's empty residence. The officers conducted a limited residential search, then exited the residence and encountered the RP on the balcony outside of his or her, the RP's front door. RP expressed dissatisfaction the officers entered his or her residence. In the IA interviews, Officer A and Officer B both asserted a warrantless entry into the RP's residence was justified by the community caretaking exception. And then Officer A acknowledged that he or she failed to activate his or her body-worn camera. So the allegations for Officer A were search and seizure, that on July 22nd, 2022, Officer A entered RP's residence without a search warrant or valid exception to the warrant requirement. And then body worn video, that on July 22nd, 2022, Officer A failed to use his or her body worn video system while he or she conducted an investigative encounter with the RP. And then for Officer B, we have the search and seizure that on July 22nd, 2022, Officer B entered RP's residence without a search warrant or a valid exception to the warrant requirement. So then for the adjudication recommendation, then I want to, as a follow-up to our last meeting, what Deputy Chief Adams said. So for the EPD chain of command, the sergeant, the first line supervisor who was involved in it, said within policy for Officer A and B for the search and seizure, but the captain, deputy chief, they all sustained. So I just wanted to make that note. So auditor, chain of command and chief final all did sustain, but there was that one. And then issues for discussion. So it was an externally generated complaint as discussed in the summary of the facts. And then we had the two classification categories, search and seizure and the body worn video. And then we have the two policies covered in the poem. And then we have the summary that we just discussed. And then we have the normal items that we provide y'all, and I won't torture you and read them all. So. And that is it. I will stop my share and let you guys take it away.
You, Ryan. And also thank you for the reminder, Alan.
No worries.
As I said, thank you for your grace. Go for it.
You're great. Okay, so just general comments, riffing on the last piece of the presentation. It's the second search and seizure in a row where the line supervisor that reviewed it found the conduct to be within policy and reversal by the higher ups. And so I think that warrants some consideration or just kind of looking like and questioning why that happens. And there will be some discussion in the other categories, and I don't want to go off too much on that. The other thing I want to say is that I couldn't really look at this case without looking at the ORS for the community caretaking, because it's 100% like what this case is all about. And 133, it basically just says the right to enter or remain on the premises of another person if it is reasonably necessary to prevent serious harm to any person or property, render aid to injured or ill persons, or locate missing persons. It's just those three things. And so the other thing is that the screen door was closed and the door was just cracked a little bit. And so, you know, when we get to what happened here in terms of classification and the result, you know, I believe that it was correctly decided, but that's my preliminary stuff. Thank you.
Juan? First of all, I had a question about whether the chief actually sustained the allegation. And I wish he'd been here today. It looks to me that on the sergeant's, in the line sergeant's memorandum, it was chief wrote as to BWV allegation only sustained.
Yeah.
And then it says, see subsequent memo from Mozan, chief concurs with sustained as to BWV allegation.
I had the same, I looked at it today and I was having the same issue. And so I looked into the database and officially, yes, they are all sustained. And so I don't know if Cindy can speak to how that got clarified, but I'm with you. When I looked at that memo today, I was like,
Wasn't there a second
There
memo?
was a-
I saw a second memo.
Yes.
second
Yeah,
memo.
there's a
There you go.
second memo where the chief says I sustain.
Yeah.
I just skipped to the cheat sheet and
It's-
I don't know.
It's from the captain.
It's from the captain.
Yeah,
But it
Captain's
is
memo.
confusing
Okay.
who writes memos and
Let me
when.
review that, because I was unsure about that, and I.
Yeah. And so I was confused as well. And so I just checked the database and I thought they were both sustained.
Yeah, there was.
I thought I copied all of them. And I don't have.
There was some confusion because we have a new system where we send these electronically and one had gone through the chain. And then, but the other, long story short, that was the way we tried to document his assessment on that one allegation. Because the other one was adjudicated on the other memo, I believe.
Okay.
In other words,
So this is
the
the other one.
memos that got sent up were not complete the first time. And so they had to.
That was, there was one,
An administrative.
there was one from Captain Mozan.
Yeah.
That has an electronic signature of
Yeah.
Chief Skinner on it. On June 5th.
I believe the first round didn't have all of the allegations against both employees on it, and so we had another set of memos get processed.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
administratively, it got a little confusing in the paperwork, but
Okay.
thank you. Yeah.
Because what bothered me about it was the closing letter that the auditor sent to the complaining party. Because in that closing letter, it said the chief concurred with the sustaining of the allegations, and if that wasn't true, that bothered me a great deal.
Oh,
Oh,
that would
yeah,
bother me
as
too.
it should.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. But no, they were sustained and
And I
then,
wondered whether she was invited to this meeting or not by the letter.
She was, so she received two letters, one, the closing letter that said what happened, and then a second letter, an invitation letter letting her know that the case would be discussed. And when,
yeah.
and we
it's actually
gave,
required.
we gave information about both the virtual ways to attend and then the physical ones if she wanted to attend in person. That's a good question.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thanks.
I had a similar question, but Rick addressed it and just wanted also make note that I found the IA investigation to be, thorough and comprehensive, and always appreciate reading that every month. So thank you.
I definitely concur with that. I also appreciate the chain of commands review of this, well, of all cases. In the interest of time, you don't have to ponder it too much, but I was wondering what impact, if any impact at all, her eventually letting them into the house had.
It didn't have an impact on what I was looking at. I think. Yeah, because I was concerned about that initial entry and how that went. And I think, you cannot give consent and then you can later give consent, right? And that doesn't mean that that first one was okay, right? So I don't know. I didn't consider it. Was my shorting.
My problem with the whole thing is exactly that point too, is that if you go in and you have an ostensible reason for going in, and then you later get consent to go in and do exactly what you wanted to do in the first place, I don't see how anybody's been hurt. And there's no harm, there's been no damage to, this thing would fail miserably if there was. And I really struggle with the credibility of the complaining party. In that person, in my view, told drastically different story to the intake person, Vicky, when she took the call, as opposed to what appeared on the camera.
Yeah.
And so I have a problem with her credibility. Go ahead, sorry. Thank
And
you.
that's all I have.
These are just opening comments.
Yeah.
So it's fun.
General
So
comments.
stretching general comments. I guess only because you just said that, Rick. I think, I disagree with the characterization of the reporting party. Only because we can't know, all of the all of the reasons why they would be responding to a person of authority in the way that they did in the moment versus how they might reflect on it after something like that happens. And so I think it's justifiable to bring it up and feel like there was an invasion of privacy, even if at the moment you're allowing for someone to, enter your home after short consideration. But overall, I think the question I have, think maybe hinges on what you asked me, because and I think this was mentioned in the memo too, was after entering with consent to the apartment were there also things that were not maybe like the best way of handling the situation? And those aren't part of the allegations, but I think the allegations were handled well, and so I'm not really concerned about that whole process. Yeah, that's my opening comments.
Thank you, Clay.
Yeah.
Right, this. Other comments before you move to round two? You sure, Alan?
No, I went first, you're fine.
Okay.
Complaint intake, classification, investigation and monitoring. And Rick, so.
Thank you, Rick.
Pass.
I also found the classification and I found the classification to be pretty straightforward. It sounds like was the first round of discussion here kind of getting into the complaint intake? Or am I
You
misunderstanding?
did it. You said general comments, but then you went with intake and.
I did.
investigation,
I
But,
did.
but your grace, we're giving you grace.
I'm gonna take it then.
You're fine. It's all good.
Thank you. Monique?
Don't think I have any.
No, no comments.
All right.
Well, we have one more.
Yes, no, it's more to training and policy, so no, I got nothing right now, so.
I would like to, I don't know, just pose a question for my colleagues here. It seems like in the IA that the officer A, I think, that there was a kind of discrepancy in the policy and their right to, right or responsibility to enter. Is that at issue here? Is that what we're discussing? Is that important? What do you all think? Or is this just a like,
think it
we can
costs-
chalk this up to, is there some context in terms of detail here? Like, I didn't see, what person, usually Carolyn is here to help us remember, I think, the kind of, or Bernadette, I think, you know, like how a person's seniority or experience goes into some of the decisions that they make here. Do we know that about this officer?
I can see if it's in the file. I mean, relatively.
A has been on the force for a significant amount of time. Only four.
Yeah,
Okay.
Being the investigator report.
Yeah,
Usually
I
the
see.
investigator includes it in their interviews.
I see 3 years for A and B was definitely new.
B is new.
Well, hold on, Bill, let me
I thought
find
it
that
was the same.
actual number. Rather than my. instinct.
2,
Thank you.
2 for B.
yeah, so
Thank you.
3 for A and 2 for B, so both get less than 5 years.
Okay.
I mean, something to your point, Jose, is that, sorry, I'm going out of.
No, please.
But I think I read things before I watched the video this time, which is not always how I do it. It's kind of fun to switch it up. And as I was reading the report, I was like right alongside Officer A saying like, yeah, you kind of do want to go on a welfare check in this moment. And that was, I don't know, however the facts were presented or however it like, you just didn't know what was going on. The door is open, it's late, it's. And then I watched the video and I just felt like, no, that it's like a different, it was clearer that the intention to go in was to look for stuff. It felt like more than to check on someone. And that to me was realized through watching the actions, not in a nefarious way, but just to check things out. And less to the point that you were making about the policy implications of what constitutes a welfare check, which has specific implications or specific triggers that allow for that.
And
Please, Alan,
my answer to you is that this is a constitutional violation. I don't really care if it's 4 years or 1 year, you're supposed to know the law. I'm concerned that this line supervisor thought it was all right. There's no way it meets that statute there, and the case law, I have the cases. It just isn't, there's nothing that presented to them at that door that warranted violating the Constitution. And so Yeah, I think that is what we're doing here. I think that's,
Okay.
I'm guessing that's why the case was selected,
Mhm.
for review, but maybe not, so.
Yeah,
I might imagine that you think I have an opposite view, and I do.
I wouldn't expect any less.
I don't think there's anything in the policy that requires a bloody trail at the
Sure.
doorway. And it's, you gotta allow the officer some discretion, and I agree with what Clay said about that. That originally he thought that it may be a good to do a caretaking look in there to see if she was okay, because let's face it, if the officer had said, no, I can't go in there.
Mm.
And there'd been a dying, bleeding woman in there, and she died as a result of not going in and helping her. Then the police department looked pretty bad because she knew all this stuff about this guy. He was erratic, there was some reference to a gun. He'd been trespassed or something from the area. And that had to have been, for some reason, that would be all bad indicia to a jury looking at that, saying, the police officer could have saved this woman's life.
But there was no evidence that the guy was there, and Rob in the interviews was even saying, like, did you see any blood? Did you see any sign of a force that, I mean, there was nothing,
The
amiss.
last point is exactly, there's nothing in the policy that requires you to see blood.
No, the law requires that it be those three, that you have to be acting under an immediate belief that those things are happening, that you're saving someone's life, that someone's in immediate
Well, I
distress.
disagree with that.
Yeah.
But
Where in the
that's the
policy does
law.
it, where in the policy does it say that?
Well, frankly, the Constitution trumps I don't even, I mean, it's a the policy, as Cindy told us earlier,
What's the
requires
case?
that
What's
they
the case?
follow the
You think you got a
Constitution.
case?
Yeah, I do have the cases here. I have,
I think we're devolving a little bit, so
Okay.
I think, and I understood, like, I'm okay with disagreement, I think I was expecting that. But I think we need to try to keep it on track a little bit, so I think. To me, I think there was the argument was, right, the officer's argument was that there's a valid community caretaking thing here. That didn't convince me, right? The policy requires that you follow the Constitution. One of the worries I had, Rick, was, well, to everybody, not just Rick, but to your point of if there was a dying woman in there, I was like, well, if there is evidence of a serious crime that they come across having just gone in, is that even gonna be admissible? Like, to me, that was one of my concerns, is they just go in.
I mean, what's admissible for what? I'm sorry.
If there had found, like, if they walk in and there is evidence of a crime.
Then it would not be admissible.
Yeah,
That would be the remedy that
exactly,
someone
and
would
that would be
have.
the remedy, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
totally, yes.
That's
And in
fine.
this case,
That's the reason the Constitution says that, is that you
Yeah.
barred from admitting that evidence.
absolutely, yes.
But you also want to promote best
But
practices.
why, that doesn't say you can't go in to save someone's life.
they need to be preventing harm, rendering aid, or locating a missing person. That's quoting from a.
Did you know where
Oregon
the
case.
son was? He was a missing person.
But he was not a reported, I'm respectfully, I just believe you're trying to excuse it, and it's really pretty clear
I
that is not rendering aid or a missing person.
Well, and to
You
me,
know, it just
to me,
isn't.
to that end, I think the point that we can agree on is if there was evidence, it wouldn't be admissible. And so to me, that's what I get concerned about is if the remedy would then come in court. That didn't happen here because there wasn't evidence of a crime found.
And
So we
people
didn't have the court's intervention, right, to be able to judge this. So instead it was me. And when I look at it, I see that if they found evidence that wouldn't have been admissible, that was a violation of the Constitution. I hear what you're saying.
But that's
And-
that's a Marianne birthday party. That's the Alice in Wonderland. There was no evidence that was seized.
Yes,
So that argument is out the door. The issue is whether or not they violated the person's constitutional rights by entering the building.
yes,
And if there was an exception to that allowed that person to go in there. then it
Yes.
would- And I think that the problem is that you're confusing the two searches. The first search, all she did was walk around and exit.
no.
They both-
The second one,
Yeah,
what everybody was complaining about was she was pulling over.
no, I hear what you're saying. I'm not concerned about the second one. I'm not, but I think what we're coming to is I think you and I are looking at this differently, and Alan and I, we're all looking at this a little bit differently. I think there's room for all of those interpretations in this room, right? So I think we should move to the next,
Real quick,
yeah.
I think for me, I also want to give Monique a chance
Thank you,
to
yeah,
speak
sorry.
here. I think I was caught up in the chief's recommendation is, and I'm just gonna read from the last paragraph. This is where I begin to see the wires crossed. The concerns outlined by the officers, while valid, are not contemporaneous with any emergency, reported emergency, or involved missing, injured, or distressed subjects. Referring there to the ORS, right?
Yeah.
Okay, their application of community caretaking was not appropriate for the nature of the call they were on.
Mhm.
So the Constitution, as the law of the land, is the more, and that's why you classified it that way, right? Is the more important and significant. That's the grounding for the arguments here.
Right, so basically, because the Constitution says you can't go in someone's house without a
Right.
reason, right? And then the community caretaking is a reason. It's one of the reasons.
And the chief is saying that was not the reason.
It didn't apply here.
Okay.
The officers thought, like, that was their argument, that was their defense, that was their reasoning, right? I'm not saying that they were coming up with a defense.
Right.
But, and so that's is exactly it. It's like the officers were saying that this was why they went in, and the chief and us were saying it doesn't really apply here.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, just for the lay, non-legally trained folks,
We're in fact-
those two layers there were there. The documents are all very well written.
Mhm.
It's I think it's an
It's a
audience
sticky
thing where,
concept,
where
yeah.
I'm seeing these things as now separate, kind of different, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Wendy.
I would have only just pointed to the chief's statements that he quite clearly laid out that perhaps, these things, the information about him was concerning, but there was nothing that day that warranted going inside the house.
Yeah,
The apartment.
that showed he was there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Clay? I just want to make sure everybody,
Oh, yeah, no,
Good.
good.
okay, yeah, I don't want to steamroll.
No, I think I'm just contributing. I think we're on policies, practices and training only because I do want to make a comment about that, but when it's my turn and I think you're first or Monique is first. And run it however you want.
Would you like to start us this round?
I don't have any comments on your training, so if you'd like to go, we can move to.
Yeah, I think, I don't think either of these officers were trying to do anything nefarious, as I mentioned earlier. I think if they thought it was welfare check, I think they believed that, but to not know that, I think, and violate constitutional rights is not great. So it did seem like there could be a training opportunity for that, and I'm not sure, if there's corrective action, if that's what it was, but they seem like they care about the community, they want to do something good, they were trying to do something good, and just like took a misstep, and so that's too bad. And it's important that they don't do that. Yeah.
I agree, no good deed unpunished. These two officers were definitely going above and beyond to locate the complainant, the theft victim, the property, and really quite surprising to go to those lengths for a couple of phones. So yeah, okay. But for me, the thing, I guess I've made this point, is that for me, it really shouldn't be very up in the air, the screen was if that was my house, the screen door was closed, the door was just cracked open inches. And there was they were not acting under emergency, and it really needs to be that. And the play between the policy and community caretaking is the exception being relied on. And it's a statutory exception. There's a law that defines what it is. And the determination by the supervisors here was that it wasn't met, which obviously I agree with. My concern, again, is that the line supervisor thought it was, so we have two relatively newer officers and a sergeant thinking that that's okay. So I believe it suggests that training is necessary on this topic. It should be refreshed. It's really important. It's the Fourth Amendment. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Okay. I think there is, from my limited perspective, I think there is an extant narrative about EPD being kind of absent these days. I'm sure you've heard this. But I just hope that the folks watching, see that there are folks trying to, that there are officers trying their best. And, I don't think this is a splitting hairs thing per se. It's clear. But at the same time, there's also room to acknowledge that, yeah, that there's some, less seasoned folks that we have an opportunity to, make it so this doesn't happen again. Yeah. Can I ask you to weigh in at this part, Leah?
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, the Constitution as a document is pretty clear, but that doesn't mean that we're all always reading it and thinking
Right.
about it. And what do you think, Eugene, police officers at a practical level are thinking about and aware of and responsible for?
I think so. This is a tough area of law. I mean, we are sitting here, you know, a year after the fact arguing about it, right? I mean, it's a tough area of law. And I give a lot of sort of deference to trying to figure it out in the moment, right? And I think this is the process, right? For sort of the nudge of like, a little too far, right? And so I think in this case, yes, I think that they were trying to do their jobs, right? And I think that this is the tool that I have for the reminder of the guardrails that are out there, right? And honestly, I think it's a pretty low harm situation, which is sort of fortunate that we get to look at this and tag it and have this be the learning lesson instead of something more serious. And I think this is one of those things that kind of, I mean, Cindy could attest to this, that this goes in cycles, right? Like, I know there were years when I started where there were a fair number of entries that Mark and I were flagging and investigating and calling out. And then sort of, you know, there's training and policy that occurs after all of those IAs come together, because we talk about lessons learned after every IA. And then the entries go down for a while and they kind of go back up, right? And so to me, we're kind of in that place, you know, you guys looked at one last month, you're looking at one this month. It's not that it's rampant. It's that we have new folks out there and it's a lot to figure out. And the more time you have, the easier it is to sort of know all of this and how it actually all should play out. So I don't know if that helps very much, but yeah, that's sort of my thinking on it.
Yeah,
Can I just add to that? And I agree
Please.
with everything that she says, but one thing that we do have a city attorney who's paying attention to the case law as it's coming out, and he comes to our in-service training with a segment, I think it quarterly, anyway, routinely, about going over with the officers, here's some of the new case law and how it might apply to how they're doing it. But search and seizure is a moving target. It changes as new case law comes in. So I'm not saying that was brand new and they shouldn't have done it, but search and seizure is sort of a trickier dynamic that the officers are having to constantly learn about.
so
and
this could,
adjust.
sorry, this could be interpreted state to state then, because this is
Oh, yeah.
an ORS thing, the community caretaking.
Yeah, so when,
It's a statute,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
so I did
that's
just
an
quick,
exception to the Constitution.
yeah, so
Ah.
like, real quick.
Yes, please.
When I first was at a law school, I clerked up in Washington, and Washington has very different. I mean, the Constitution it's not even that different, right? But it just gets interpreted differently over the years, right? So it was just, even shifting back down here was like a restart for me. So yeah, no, it's different among states, and there's different statutes that jump into it, and then there's the whole public records law component.
Table that.
I'm just muttering now.
That'll be a research project for later on. Okay, I think that's helpful to think about, like, okay, this is a constitutional violation, but a state level idiosyncrasy.
I mean, I would say it's the federal constitution's right to privacy, and there is a state statute that allows for, that specifies around community caretaking, that in this case, the officer felt applied. Those of us reviewing it didn't. I hope that helps.
It wouldn't survive on appeal.
Oh, God, let's not.
Okay, yep.
Can I say
Yeah.
one thing? That is, there are two remedies for someone who thinks they've been aggrieved by violation of the Constitution. One is you move against the admission of a piece of evidence that's been seized pursuant to that. Or two, you sue the individual, the officer who has violated your space and damaged you in some way.
Mhm.
Neither one of those apply here.
Well, and if they applied, I would have dismissed it. Because that's an alternate remedy that applies better than what this system allows for.
Oh, I'm sorry,
If either of those apply, like if there was a 1983 case going on, or if there was a criminal case where this was gonna get decided by the criminal court, if either of those were in play here, I would have dismissed it as alternate remedy, because those courts are far more qualified, they have systems in place to look at all of it.
well,
That was never-
qualified, because we
Well,
got three lawyers arguing.
Can I-
The top who's been on,
Right.
on the source for 4 years to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and this is the system that was available, that was left, right? So those all have processes in place where if there was a 1983 claim, or if there was a criminal case ongoing, the courts would have looked at that. And they would have done, they have a whole thing for that, right? That's their job. None of those were in play here, so the only thing I had was this, right? Okay, the courts aren't going to tell you that this was a violation. So that's what I'm saying about the low harm and the low level, like, that's sort of what our system is made for, is to look at those and do the education piece of it, hopefully.
Can we hand off to Monique and then Alan?
Can I ask?
Yeah.
At least indirectly, is it not a goal of the auditor's department to promote best practices? So we don't want officers to do things that would lead to evidence being dismissed in other cases?
I mean, sure, yes, no, I think one of the things that I work towards is improvement in police services overall, right? And so, yes, I think I've never articulated it in that way, and and so I need to think about it, because it takes time to think about things sometimes, but I think, yes, right, like, I want it to be, I want our police services to be excellent. And it's a high standard. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask Rick a question. Isn't the purview of this board, isn't the purpose? Did you, I didn't mean, yes,
done, yes.
okay, sorry. It's the conduct, that it's the going in, it's these two officers went in. And that conduct is being examined by the auditor and determined to be a statutory violation of this exception that they're relying on. What better way, it shouldn't require a 1983 or some other remedy, exclusion or anything. Isn't it the point of this to discuss the going in, what they did and whether it was right or wrong? I mean, what else is the CRB for?
My problem with it is you've removed all of the discretion and the reasonableness factor out of the issue completely when you're talking about the community care exception. There has to be some discretion on the part of the cop to make a determination. It has to be justified. And if it is justified and the police officer reasonably believes that they have the duty to go in there, then that needs to be considered, but it seems to have been ignored in this case.
Oh, no, okay, no, I appreciate that, and I think I appreciate.
Nowhere
that.
was it discussed by the auditor's report.
Well, no, and thank you, that's good, like, I can go into that and I can speak to that more here, because to me, the reasoning that was offered, right, the evidence that was sort of in play, the totality of the circumstances, if you will, wasn't such that a reasonable officer would assume that they were justified in going in. I didn't see that. I think the cracked door, the closed screen door in the middle of July, like, I don't see that. The indicators, I understand that this person had some indicators. I didn't see any evidence that this person was in that place.
The problem with that is that you say that you didn't see the evidence, but whose responsibility is to put the evidence in? the officer can't defend himself or herself in that situation. They can't put in evidence.
No, but they can write in their report all the reasons, and they did. And when I looked at the situation, I didn't see a reasonable officer standard being met.
And neither did the chief.
And I looked at the chief, yeah. So, and I appreciate that, because I take the feedback that I could have articulated that better.
Rick, I just want to address your point that I think. I appreciate you bringing that perspective here. I think that's essentially what this dispute is turning on, which is we have to offload practical reasoning to officers. If I'm hearing you correctly, we have to have room for that in these investigations and.
In their work.
What's that?
In their work, they have to be able to
Yeah.
make.
We want them to have
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
I don't want to make those decisions.
Right, and I think the other thing is, this, a sustained allegation that resulted in assumedly resulted in corrective action. It feels like a lot, it's stressful for the officer, like I'm not minimizing it in any way, and this is the course that we have for policy violations, and this is the route that we have, right? So sometimes I think like, oh, I would have much rather just sat down with this officer and been like, okay, so when I look at this, this is what I see, and let's have a conversation, and let's like learn from each other and do that. And sometimes cases are appropriate for that, and we're working on having ways to accomplish that more frequently. But this is the tool that I have.
No question.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate that we could have debates like this and that we could leave room for human emotions in it as well. Yeah, thank you.
Regional disagreement.
And it's good. There has to be some trust involved, and I appreciate seeing that play out. At this point, we are at adjudication recommendations. I believe it's Clay's turn to start us off.
I agree with the adjudication recommendations that are recorded on the presentation. We noted that there was some disagreement within the police bureau's overall process, but the actual command. I'm sorry. Police departments. Yeah, whatever I was saying. Substitute department for the bureau.
Sorry.
And there was some confusion, the administrative sort of tracking of that, I was also confused, and I found the outcome from reading the letter to the reporting party, which was nice to read because it did provide a lot of facts and also the opportunity to participate in this meeting. So anyway, I don't have any disagreement with the adjudication.
I agree with the auditor and the chain of commands recommendations, and I also just want to emphasize that I really do recognize that they were going above and beyond on what many people would feel would be police even respond to that. They really even will do that. So again, it's unfortunate, but it's learning, and hopefully the corrective action, if any, reflected the gravitas of the situation.
I agree with the notation made by the chief as to the body worn video allegation only as standing allegation. The rest of it I would find within policy.
Thank you, Rick. I concur with the recommendations. Yeah, I just think appreciate that this is an opportunity for us to think about if we want officers to do this, and we're all at this table because, like Leah said, we do want them to do this, and we want them to do this in a way that serves the people of Eugene. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I'm still learning to do this as an adult too, that like we can hold people to standards while at the same time figuring out ways to, I don't know, not crush them and help them, encourage them to do better.
Support them. Yeah.
And that's tough and difficult and I don't know, always a little bit weird feeling. So yeah.
I agree with each of the adjudications.
All right. We have time now for our auditor report.
The Do we? No. Sorry.
Yes.
Welcome, everybody. It's nice to be back in person. Thank you for being accommodating as I dealt with family stuff last month, and Lord knows how that all came through over the TV. So just thank you for being patient with me. We are having, and we are experiencing an uptick in complaints, a substantial uptick in complaints. So it kind of crept up in August. We got 37 complaints in August. We had 32 complaints in September. We have 20 so far this month, and it's the 10th. So there's a lot of complaints happening. I can't say there's like a unifying trend that I can identify readily or easily. So we'll work on that. But right now we're just trying to sort of deal with the onslaught. So let's see. Maybe this is, we're continuing to work on our accessibility. Maybe this is what is causing it. I'm not sure. So our public portal is online. Beatrice went through our website and revamped it all. She learned how to do the website, you guys.
You're here.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So spend some time on that. She did the CRB one as well, and then she's working on the Spanish facing page to have it just be a little more user friendly. But yeah, go spend some time when you're bored or when you're just interested and click through. And then she also told me today, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud. If you have feedback, let us know. Because she's learned how to do it all, so she can like easily change it. I'm so impressed and pleased and so proud. So we have that. We are working on a report on pursuits because definitely seeing an uptick in those. We are looking, there were 11 uses of force in September. There were 97 reportable uses of force so far this year. So we review all of those. You know sort of the drill, right? And then we're hoping to get all of those reports out by the end of the year, or mostly the pursuit report out by the end of the year. And then next month, you guys are off because we are at a conference. So enjoy your month. And then unfortunately, we'll be back in December, which is the crazy month. So but we'll get that all figured out and we'll have an interesting case that may or may not be search and seizure related because we are beating this horse. Sorry.
Do you get to travel somewhere nice?
Chicago in November, so
It's a wash.
it'll be fine.
Second city still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
A football game.
experience some stuff. But yeah, I'll come back and report on all the fun stuff that we learned. But yeah, do you guys have any questions, or I'm gonna try to keep it short and sweet. Oh, okay. Did I miss anything, Lindsay, Rob? Okay.
Busy.
He's busy. It's a lot.
Normally the points kind of go up and down, but it's been.
You're just on a.
Do you, is, I know it's early to tell, but does this have a correlational relationship with the kind of upstart of society again or something?
Maybe. I mean, we're definitely seeing a lot of.
Yeah.
In school,
Sure.
university.
There's like, I don't know that there's some like neighbor clashing happening. A lot of people who just really don't like the people they live near and then they have to interact with them a lot. And I think there is an element, like something that a conference I went to recently, last year, but they were talking about the uptick in gun violence and sort of looking at it as the root cause is sort of people don't know how to problem solve with each other anymore. And if I look at it through that lens, I can see it, right? Like there's a whole lot of people not knowing how to problem solve with each other. And luckily we're not, I mean, we aren't seeing the violent end to it, right? But at least in our office, that's what we see, a lot of just not being able to handle interpersonal conflict. And all the other societal ills that we're dealing with. So it's hard to really put a trend sort of marker on it, but there's just a lot. So I grabbed our highest year was I think 2019. We had 446 complaints that year. We had 330 something last year, and we are definitely on track for about 400 at this point. So we'll just see how it goes.
Yeah.
We'll keep you posted.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, closing comments. We're back to you, Alan. Barrister.
Sorry for that, everybody. Apologies in advance. No, I just would like to thank Sergeant. Thank you for being here, and thank you for presenting. Very, very appreciated. Rob and Lindsay and Leah, thank you all, and thank my fellow board members for putting up with me. Thank you.
I have no comments. Thank you.
Just want to shout out to Beatrice for work on the website. Thank you all for being here.
Beatrice is a hard worker. She
She's
really ran those, 2 booths in the summer. It was awesome.
Right?
Um, I don't think I've said in a while, but I do feel really grateful and lucky to be doing this. It's not necessarily a privilege because it's a volunteer opportunity, but it does feel like a great opportunity to learn. I feel like I'm learning a lot. Yeah, that'll be it.
Thanks. Where's that?
Yeah, well, I'll say bureau again because
Oh, you went so well. I lose the bet now.
my experience in the police bureau in Portland was just, yeah, exactly. It was so stressful because of all of the things that we were dealing with as a bureau at the time. And I saw sort of the worst of it, and it's really nice to see some challenges in the Eugene Police Department, but also see how it's handled so effectively, and that, like, today's case, for example, is officers doing really good work and just like taking a slight misstep, and that's what we're discussing, and that it's just really different than what I was doing in Portland. So I appreciate being involved in this department, the work that you all are doing up there, and the work that's being done to sort of make that aware, make that publicly available to people through the science.
All right, we are adjourning only 6 minutes late. Way to stay on time, everybody. See you in December.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Thank you for running the meeting.
And if anyone ever has any questions about anything they're seeing or not